You've been praying, working, waiting, trying to make sense of why life feels like a constant uphill climb. You tell yourself you're being faithful, that persistence is holy. But deep down, there's a quiet exhaustion you can't shake. It's that subtle tension between what you want and what God seems to be allowing. You feel it every time something doesn't go your way. Every closed door, every delay, every unanswered prayer feels like resistance. But what if it's not resistance at all? What if it's God gently standing in your way? We often imagine the spiritual battle as something out there, demons, temptation, darkness. But sometimes the fight is inward. It's between your will and His, between the part of you that wants to control your destiny and the part of you that's terrified of surrendering it. And here's the truth most people never admit. We can fight God in the name of obedience. You can be praying, fasting, and still be wrestling, not because you're faithless, but because you haven't yet learned to let go. This fight doesn't always look violent. It looks like anxious planning, like constantly asking for signs, like pushing for answers God hasn't revealed yet. You think you're moving in faith, but it's really fear dressed in holy language. The fear of not being enough. The fear that if you don't make it happen, it never will. And so you keep wrestling, not realizing that the one you're wrestling with is the same one trying to bless you. Because the truth is, surrender isn't weakness. It's the moment you stop confusing motion for progress. The moment you realize your strength has limits, but His doesn't. The moment your prayers shift from God, make it happen, to God, have your way. That's when peace begins to seep through the cracks of your frustration. That's when you start to see that the delays weren't punishment. They were protection. And maybe that's what He's been trying to show you all along. That He doesn't need your effort. He desires your trust. That He's not impressed by how long you can fight, but how deeply you can yield. Because sometimes, what you call spiritual warfare is really God asking for your surrender. And the longer you resist, the longer you stay in the storm that was meant to pass. So take a breath. Stop pushing. Stop trying to fix what only grace can heal. God's not asking you to prove your strength. He's inviting you to rest in His. Maybe the battle ends not when you win, but when you finally kneel. Not in defeat, but in surrender. There comes a moment when you start to wonder, why does obedience hurt so much? You thought following God would lead to peace, but instead, it feels like breaking. Like everything you've built is being undone piece by piece. The friendships, the dreams, the plans, all slowly stripped away. And in the silence, you start to ask the question most Christians are afraid to voice. God, why does it feel like you're fighting me? It's strange, isn't it? The same God who promised to give you a future and a hope now feels like the one holding you back. You pray for open doors, but they keep closing. You ask for clarity, but it only gets darker. It feels cruel, almost unfair, until you realize something powerful. Sometimes God's no is not rejection, it's redirection. He's not fighting against you. He's fighting for you, even when it doesn't look like it. Because if He gave you everything you wanted right now, it would destroy you. You're asking for blessings you're not yet strong enough to carry. You're praying for a platform, but you still crave people's approval. You want love, but your heart still bleeds for validation. So He waits. Not to punish you, but to prepare you. Every delay is a mercy. Every closed door is a kindness. Every unanswered prayer is a form of protection you won't recognize until later. And when it feels like you're losing control, that's when His hands are closest. Because surrender isn't just giving up, it's being held. It's the moment your plans fall apart and His begin to make sense. You see, you thought He wanted your progress, but He wanted your posture. You thought He wanted your achievements, but He wanted your alignment. And sometimes the only way to realign you is to break what was built on pride. It's painful, yes, but pain has always been God's most honest language. It's where He speaks the clearest, not through success, but through surrender. Because when the noise fades and the world stops listening, that's when you finally hear Him whisper, "You don't need to fight anymore." It's not punishment, it's invitation to rest, to trust, to finally stop striving. And if you've been blessed by this kind of truth, if you feel seen, spoken to, or understood, I want to invite you to go even deeper with us. This channel exists to create a space where believers can wrestle with their questions and still find peace. If you'd like to support what we're doing, consider becoming a member of this channel. Your support helps us keep making videos that speak to hearts like yours, the ones still learning to surrender. There's a strange silence that follows surrender. Not the silence of emptiness, but of release. You wake up one day, and the fight is gone. The questions haven't all been answered. The circumstances haven't magically changed. But something inside you has. You no longer need to know why. You've stopped wrestling for control, and suddenly, the world feels lighter. That's the quiet only obedience can bring. The peace that doesn't come from getting what you want, but from finally trusting who's in charge. When you let go, it doesn't look dramatic. There's no thunder, no applause, no angelic choir, just stillness. A moment where your hands unclench, your heart slows, and you whisper, "All right, Lord, I'm done fighting." And in that whisper, heaven moves. Because God doesn't need your performance. He responds to your surrender. He's been waiting, patiently, for that moment where your heart finally says, "Have your way." And that's when the healing begins. Not because the pain is gone, but because you've stopped using it as armor. You stop needing everything to make sense. You stop defending your timeline. You start seeing how even the detours had purpose. The disappointments weren't wasted. They were directions. You realize that maybe all along, God wasn't asking you to understand Him. He was asking you to trust Him in the dark. Surrender doesn't erase your scars. It transforms them. The same wounds that once made you question God become the places where His light shines through. You start to see that what He took away wasn't punishment. It was pruning. That what He delayed wasn't denial. It was development. And when you look back, you realize the pain that nearly broke you was the very thing that built your faith. Because once you surrender, your definition of winning changes. You stop asking, "When will God come through?" and start saying, "Even if He doesn't, He's still good." That's freedom. That's what it means to stop fighting and finally rest. To walk through life without forcing, without striving, just walking with Him, steady and surrendered. You realize He was never asking you to win battles. He was asking you to trust the one who already did. So now the same hands that once fought against Him are lifted in peace. Not as a soldier ready for war, but as a child finally coming home. This is the posture that changes everything. Not power, not perfection, just surrender. Because the moment you stop fighting God is the moment you finally find Him. When you finally stop fighting God, something shifts, not around you, but within you. The weight you've carried for years suddenly feels lighter. The noise in your head begins to quiet. The same things that used to trigger panic now bring peace. Because when your spirit stops resisting, your heart starts hearing again. And in that stillness, you begin to notice it. The gentle rhythm of God's voice, guiding you step by step, like a father teaching his child to walk again. This is the beauty of surrender. It doesn't end in loss. It ends in clarity. You start to see that the very thing you were afraid to let go of was the thing blocking what God was trying to give you. You were holding on to comfort, but He was offering calling. You were chasing control, but He was offering communion. When you finally release the outcome, you make room for the one who writes better endings than you ever could, and suddenly, the waiting doesn't feel like punishment anymore. It feels like preparation. You realize the silence was never absence. It was training. God wasn't withholding answers. He was shaping your heart to hold revelation. Every "not yet" was Him making sure that when the blessing came, it wouldn't replace the blesser. You stop asking for escape and start asking for endurance. Because you see now, surrender isn't the end of the story. It's where the story finally begins. In that moment, peace turns into strength. Not the kind that comes from pride or effort, but the quiet confidence that says, even if I don't understand, I'm safe here. You stop running ahead of God and start walking beside Him. You don't need every door to open anymore, just the right one. You don't need everyone to understand you, just the assurance that He does. That's what surrender does. It turns chaos into calm, fear into faith, and striving into stillness. Maybe that's what God's been trying to teach you all along. That victory doesn't look like conquering everything around you. It looks like being conquered by His love. The moment you fall into His will, you realize He was never trying to take something from you. He was trying to free you from what was taking you from Him. Surrender was never about losing. It was about coming home. And if this message spoke to your spirit, if it reminded you that you're not alone in the wrestle, I want to invite you to be part of something bigger. This channel isn't just about videos. It's about building a space where people can slow down, breathe, and hear God again. If you want to help us keep creating stories like this, stories that pull people closer to Him, consider becoming a member of this channel. Your support doesn't just sustain content, it helps spread peace in a world that's forgotten how to be still.